I'm not seeing it online.
Okay.
Sorry. Great. Okay. The June 6, 2022 Oregon Lottery Commission work session is called to order. It's noted for the record a quorum of commissioners is present for today's meeting. Today's work session is the Oregon Lottery Commission, Oregon Lottery Executive Team, and a representative from the Department of Justice, and will include an executive session. This meeting, with the exception of executive session, is being live streamed on the internet, and a link is posted on the Oregon Lottery website. Will the clerk call the roll?
Commissioner Patel?
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Here.
Commissioner Wilcox? Here. Chair Staffa?
Here. Thank you. I wanted to take a minute and just address the group that's assembled here to sort of give you my thoughts and a few comments about the day. First of all, I want to welcome you to Northwest Natural. As I mentioned a little earlier, this is our new facility. Similarly, we actually moved into this facility in March of 2020, which was right before COVID. COVID had already been taking place, but that's when the mandates came out about work from home and masking and various things like that. So I'm always quick to point out that I moved in. We moved everybody into this facility within a 3-week period. I moved in the 3rd week, and then they moved us all home the next week. So, but this building was never without someone in it because we operate gas control out of it. So we had to manage those logistics like a lot of businesses did. First, I wanted to say that as a utility, Northwest Natural is really deeply tied to the community. One of the reasons that we built this building is that I'm sure all of you recognize that when in a disaster, most people look to their utilities to stay operating. You want water, you want heat, you want lights. So we felt the need to move into to redo a building. Actually, we talked about redoing the building we were in because we were not seismically sound. And at that time, I'm sure you recall a few years ago, the Cascadia event was being talked about as although it's a 300-year event, we're in the last 50 years of that. And we were in a flood zone. So that had we upgraded that building to be seismic, we would have still sunk into the ground and would have been operational. The reason I tell you all that is that this building, at least in 2020, was the most seismically sound building in the Portland metro area. Our architects assured us of that. It may be true today, maybe not, but I'm always quick to tell people, especially in the state too, that if something happens and you're in this area and you need a place to go, you go to this building. I strongly believe you'll be safe here. We're at a level where we could be operational in 1 hour. I also wanted to say that we also believe in giving back to the community. That's part of why we offer this building for not just lottery issues, but almost any entity, nonprofit, any state entity that calls us and says, if you have a facility we could use, we offer it as a contribution to whatever is going on. And usually, depending on budget time, we can offer some kind of refreshment. So that's part of why I want to thank you. This is very easy for me to have you all here. It's not as easy for some of you, but thank you for joining us. I also wanted to tell you how excited I'm actually to see all of you face to face, right? I know that dates me. I really do know it. And I want to tell you that I am a believer in using technology efficiently. And so there are times when I think that doing a meeting by video or by phone is perfectly acceptable. But I do think we connect differently when we're face to face. And I personally have missed seeing all of you. And some of you that I've never met before, I'm really pleased to meet. So I just wanted to say I'm really happy that you're all here, and that I know Barry and I have talked about on the go forward basis, sort of hybrid models of when does it make sense to be in person, like a work session like this, and when is it just perfectly acceptable to use technology? Because I know that it's not easy for some of you to get everywhere. Now, if you'll just bear with me for a few more minutes, I know we're started a little late today. I wanted to talk a little bit about today. I know that most of you know I have a long history with the lottery, way before I stepped onto the commission, and I have never made any bones about the fact that it's been an honor for me to serve on this commission. But I have a longstanding commitment to the health of the lottery. I guess I would say that and this is not in any way to diminish this. One of our mandates is the fish, right? And fairness, integrity, security, and honesty of the lottery. And that is incredibly important to all of us. Today, I want to emphasize that today is largely about the financial integrity and health of the lottery. Just again, with my long-standing role with the lottery, the financial health of this entity, the viability, the financial stability and sustainability of lottery is critical for the state of Oregon. In all my roles where I've touched or been in any way part of the lottery, actually at DOJ one time, I spent some time advising the lottery. I would tell you that without the lottery, Oregon's in a bad way. Now, people's personal beliefs about the lottery, notwithstanding, I respect those. This is the decision has been made at the state level that the state supports the lottery. So for me, our job, in addition to supporting the fish and making sure that we meet that mandate, is to make sure that this entity is financially healthy going forward. So today's our day to focus on budget and policy related to our financial condition going forward. So I really encourage you to use today, ask all your questions. I know sometimes, and I feel this way too, sometimes I think, should I ask this question? It's really one I probably should know. I've been on the lottery for like over 2 terms. I should know this answer. And then I think, oh, well, this is kind of embarrassing. Maybe I'll just ask Barry afterwards so I'm not embarrassed in front of everybody. But oftentimes, as you know, you've been with me a long time, I don't wait. I usually ask and realize, oh yeah, they did tell me this before. But I encourage you to use today to do that, because there is something about that connection of face-to-face. So ask your questions. And I don't think anybody ever has made me feel like it was stupid. They may have in their mind thought, she kind of missed that in the materials, but hey, do it anyway. The other thing I would say is that we are a citizen governing body, right? We're appointed. This is not our day job. Nobody in this room expects you to understand the day-to-day management of the lottery, perfectly. So again, use this time so we can share our ideas, ask for questions, question each other. And I believe it helps this team to meet the promise of the lottery. We're here as commissioners to help provide our expertise and our guidance and our direction. We're not here to manage the lottery. We're not here to execute on what they have to do. That's up to the other people in this room. But I do think that we offer some help with that. We offer some vision of what the commission thinks might be the right direction going forward. Trust me, if they don't agree with us, they'll tell us. And the last item I'd say is that approving the annual budget and the business plan is, frankly, from my point of view, one of the most important things this commission does. So that's what today is about. We won't be taking any votes today, so you don't need to worry about how to come to a decision on anything. And here's where I apologize. I somehow was a little confused this weekend. I'm old school. I take all of my notes on hard copy, and I left all my notes at home. So I'll be doing this from scratch, which will explain to you why I think we need to ask all our stupid questions. After today's discussion, the staff is going to take the information, they're going to refine the materials, and then we'll come back on the 24th for a commission meeting. I would also tell you, which is what I do often, if you have questions and they're ones that come to mind after the meeting today, and or you just feel like I'm going to take that one offline, Barry and his team never failed to follow up with us and follow up timely. And so I encourage you to do that. And if there's anything that you can, that I can help you with, you're welcome to follow up with me as well. So with that, welcome, and let's move forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Marty, for those comments. Good morning, everyone. For the record, of course, Barry Pack, Director. We'll do some introductions here in a moment. I wanted just to take a second to not be able to advance the PowerPoint. Yeah. The joys of technology. There we go. Yeah, we're working. Thanks, Nick. All right, so we are a little behind schedule here, but that's okay. We will get back on track. So you'll see through the morning, we're going to spend most of the morning talking about our mission, vision, and values, our primary business objectives that we're suggesting for the next fiscal year, and then have plenty of time to really dive deep into the budget. We can stay at a high level. We can go as deep as you want. We have sent you materials in advance. We have all of the backup materials available, so we can go as deep as you want to. I'll just be taking my cues from you and your questions. Otherwise, Kathy Ortega and I will be walking you through kind of at a high level, and then we'll see where we go from there. There are a couple of key budget policy choices that we want your input on, so that will be in the second half of the budget review this morning. And then we'll be taking a lunch break. You're on your own. I figured you all have day jobs of some kind or another, and you might want to check in with your office and grab a quick bite to eat. We'll return after lunch for an executive session to go over some advice from council. And then the afternoon, we'll spend a good chunk of time talking about the video lottery ecosystem and some of the policy choices that are before us today. We'll wrap up with a quick update on interim legislative activity and any other outstanding parking lot issues that we need to address. And we will adjourn no later than 4:30. I will work hard to keep us on that timeline. And if we end early, we end early. So with that, I'd like to do a round of introductions. And of course, can't have a meeting without a little bit of get to know you time as well. So I will just say that not joining us today are Syed Hussein, our Chief Information Officer, who is home sick, and then Janelle Simmons, our Chief Human Resource Officer, is out on family personal business and is not able to join us today. Kathy Ortega is attending by Zoom, and hopefully she is on and able to hear us and able to participate. So if we could start with we'll just go around the room. Please introduce yourself, your name, your title, if you're a job, what you do at the lottery, if you work for the lottery, if you're a commissioner, tell us something about your life, and then answer this question: what is the most influential book you have read? And Ty, I'm going to look to you to start.
All right, you might have to come back to me at the end. I'm having a hard time thinking which one. Okay. Ty Colangelo, Chief Operations Officer of the Oregon Lottery. And I'll elaborate perhaps a little bit more on my background, just because this is the first time I'm here in person. I started in October 20, so I've been with the lottery for almost 2 years. I've been leading at the intersection of strategy and operations for a very long time. Before I joined the lottery, I was at Nike, and I was at that intersection of strategy and operations for workplace experience. Before that, I was in the energy industry for a number of years. My last role being the COO of Western Energy Institute. So what's interesting about my skill set and my experience is that I started out as a creative in design and marketing communication. And so I use a lot of design principles in how I lead operations. So it's also a very creative approach. And in terms of most influential book you read, it's just so tough to pick. Can you come back to me again?
Sure.
I'm gonna have to think on that, sorry.
Morning, I'm Matt Shelby, Chief Communications and Engagement Officer here at the lottery. I've been here coming up on 5 years. I can't believe that, but apparently that's true. The calendar doesn't lie. My team does a number of things, but we manage lottery's relationship with the legislature, with the media. We handle internal communications, rule and policy development. Work very closely with Jay on some of that work. And then also over the last couple of years, a growing change management team. So great that lottery is dedicated some resources to supporting our employees be successful through change. And hey, the last couple of years, what a great time to kick off some change management. Gosh, most influential book. Thanks, Barry. I think, I'm gonna go way back. And I'm gonna say Robin Cody, Ricochet River. That's like middle school for me, but I've read lots of books since, I promise. But that one was actually takes place in Estacada. And the Gorge, and it's kind of a coming of age novel, but it takes place in Oregon and delves into all sorts of kind of social issues around lots of things. But yeah, a really good book, and kind of set me, I think, when I think of kind of what set me on my way, at least in terms of kind of thinking and questioning, that was a good one.
Good morning. I'm Mike Wells. I'm the Assistant Director for Security at the lottery. Also oversee retail contracts and the compliance group within that. I've been at the lottery about 3 years at this point, which also has flown by. So for me, again, Barry doesn't tell us these ahead of time, which would be a little easier. I think probably the most recent for me that I've read is called Multipliers, which is about engaging with your staff, making sure you're focusing on their strengths, and the organization get better productivity. So.
Morning, I'm Nate Carter. I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the Tax and Finance section of the Oregon Department of Justice. I've been advising lottery since I think about 2014. In connection with Cynthia Burns, and then became the contact counsel a couple of years back. As far as what I primarily do is answer legal questions that come up around lottery's authority to offer different games or public records requests or what have you. If I have to pick a book, I'm going to reach back to college for a social psych called Influence by Robert Cialdini. I wouldn't recommend reading it now. I've gone back and watched it. It's too cute by half. It was aimed at the 18 to 22 age gap, but a lot of the concepts in there about how people basically seek to pressure each other still have colored my thinking heavily still today.
My name is Marty Ramirez. I'm the newest commissioner in less than a year now. My day job, I'm a chief operating officer for a holding company out on the east side. My most influential book, I would say, was probably Fountainhead by Anne Rand.
I'm Marty Safoff. My day job is I'm the general counsel and senior vice president of regulation for Northwest Natural Gas Company. I do just a bunch of lawyer stuff as well as a bunch of policy and regulatory external interfacing with the government, and as a part of what I do during the day. I've been with the Rock Lottery, over 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm coming up on the end of my term. I'm not necessarily happy about that, but it's been a wonderful experience of being in this role. So I thank you all. I have lots of influential books, and so I'm going to name a couple. And because everybody kind of went back in time, I thought I would, I don't know, I think that when you or somebody said, I thought, oh yeah, there was that one when I was in college. The two though that come to mind, and actually Barry will know this because I told him I was going to send one of to him, and I am. The Ideal Team and the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I don't know that any of you have ever heard of that or read that, but you may soon be hearing about it. If I can convince Barry that he needs to share it with all of you. Very influential for me in terms of thinking through what is it, how do you make your organization effective? How do you make your the people around you effective in working? And the concept that comes out of that is the A team and who's the first team. And I hope that if Barry does find it useful, that you all find it useful too. The other one that is at personal level was influential to me. I read in college. It was called, I'm sorry, I'm escaping on authors. That's a bad thing for the author. It's called The Yellow Wallpaper. Anybody recognize that one? it's like a 1 hour read. But for a lot of women in my era, when we read that, it helped us formulate better our thoughts about being women in this society. It's about a woman who is kept in a yellow room because the people around her believe that she is odd. And it's really about when I look back now, it's about gaslighting and women and her process of thinking through who she is and whether or not they're right about her or not about her. And so anyway, it was very influential at that time. So those are my three.
Very packed director, which means I don't do anything, but do a lot of talking and listening, so that's good. I picked this question because it was so hard to answer, Ty, because like others, I have many, but I think the one that I reached back for was I read when I was in high school, and it's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. And Annie Dillard is a wonderful writer of prose and poetry. She's a naturalist, but she combines a scientific approach to what she observes in the natural world with sort of a metaphysical human connection and interaction. And the thing that sticks with me to the day is this fact that chlorophyll, the difference between chlorophyll and hemoglobin is 1 atom. So I'll leave you with that.
Malin Patel, VP for Finance and Treasurer is my day job. Corporate finance functions, treasury, and supply chain logistics, and campus planning, and real estate. Most influential book, I'll go back to childhood. The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. You just kind of think about it, you can read it now, and it's like, oh man, how much I'm taking from my parents and grandparents, and how much my kids are going to take from me, and stuff like how to give back, and just reflecting on that. Yeah.
I'm Julie Wilcox. I think I've been in the commission 4 years, maybe 3, I'm not sure. I am the law enforcement representative on the commission. I've been with the state police for 26 years. I now just walk dogs and go to trails and camp and backpack. Probably my most influential book, that's a big one for me too, because I minored in teaching kids reading. Go back probably to Kill a Mockingbird. I always thought Scout was incredible. Still think of her at times. Recently, I read The Boys in the Boat, which I don't know why it's so late to get to, but I was really impressed with the fortitude of these working class young men that went all the way to the 36 Olympics. So that's it.
Kathy Stromberg, Corporate Marketing Officer. I love that. It's a new title. Influential books. Anything by Daniel Pink, I love. I love anything that has to do with the mind of people and how we all think and how it affects everything. Probably most recently, I've been reading tons of customer books on customer success, which all my colleagues hate. I'm always sending notes on, hey, have you read this one? But most recently, just the one by a Bain consultant that, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was just such a great book with examples of focusing on customers and how important that is, and because that's such a journey we're all on. I find that kind of information really inspiring, I guess, but to help me continue to push and help others try to think about customers. It's so important.
Kathy Ortega.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Kathy Ortega, CFO at the lottery. I am going on my 22nd year at the lottery. In addition to your normal financial functions, I have procurement and contract, warehouse distribution and facilities, strategic sourcing and player services. When somebody asks me about my most, I don't know whether it's favorite or most influential book, I always go with the one that consistently comes to my mind first. And because it does that, it had a lot of effect on me. And so I would say that it is a book titled Unbroken. It's a World War II story about resilience, survival, and redemption. And Julie, my second favorite one that always jumps to mind is Boys in the Boat. There's a lot of similar themes between those two books. So that's my most favorite book.
Ty, take a vote now.
Right away now. And now that others have shared more than one, I was like, oh, this makes it a little bit easier. I was always interested in history. I was a social science major in undergrad and was keenly interested in people's ideas about the future. So what jumped to mind was 1984, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, those types of books. I just think it's always fascinating to see what people imagine and then make comparisons to what has actually happened.
I am Elisa Zavala, Senior Executive Assistant to the Director of the Commission. Most influential book, probably childhood book, would be Diary of Anne Frank, just a story of hope.
Sorry.
Nick Galeotto with the Oregon Lottery Service Desk, and the most influential book I've read, I would say probably lately, is my calculus.
Very sad statement.
All right, thank you all for that. As you can tell, this is a very informal setting, so please interrupt me as we go through with any questions, wave a hand or whatever. I will probably be calling on some of my colleagues to help share some information now and then so that I am not talking all day long. But to get us started, we'll just wait again for a second. There we go. Thank you. Just to refresh, always important to keep at top of mind our mission, and this of course is the sort of the abbreviated mission statement that we use to operate a lottery with the highest standards of security, integrity, and maximize revenue for the people of Oregon, commensurate with the public good. So always keeping that balance in mind, and that balance is reflected in the materials that you're going to see today. Still can't advance. Okay, thank you. So as you'll recall, we have a 5-year strategic plan that we have been operating off of for the last several years. One of the major pillars of that was moving gaming into the digital space, and then last year the governor provided us with a policy direction that was not what she wanted us to be doing. So we paused and regrouped, and this is the planning vision that we have been operating under for the last year or so. You've seen this before, but really, I think the direction from the governor helped us focus a little bit on what was really important and perhaps undervalued at the time, which was the importance of sustainability of the games that we do have. Marty Lynn shared the value that the lottery brings to the state. We really have to make sure that we're able to sustain that over the long term. And a little fact that I've been sharing with a lot of people recently is, the legislature bonds uses our revenues to sell revenue bonds to fund infrastructure projects across the state. There's only a handful of states that do that with their lottery dollars. I think it's about 4. We are the most active in that program, and we have the highest credit rating of any lottery in the country, AAA from Standard & Poor's and a AA plus from Moody's. We are closing, I think we have closed the most recent bond sale. And with that sale, Oregon now has $1.25 billion of outstanding debt to pay, amortized out to 2041. So when we talk about sustainability, it's not just about the next year or 2 or 5 years. I feel an obligation as the director to make sure that we are strong for 20, 30 plus years, because the state has a moral obligation to maintain that credit, and the projects that it funds are helping all communities all across the state. Relevancy is important because we have to make sure that our customers whose behaviors and preferences of how they engage with leading brands continues to evolve and change. We have to make sure that we're able to stay relevant with them. And then we need to be prepared for the future, whatever that may bring from a technology perspective. We need to be best in class from an infrastructure and architecture perspective. So this is the vision that we've been using to guide the decisions that we make and the recommendations that we're bringing to you today. We've also spent about the last 9 months or so working on our values. We had values for the organization in the past, but they were dated a little bit. They weren't necessarily reflective of where we were approaching things today. And so I worked with our team here before you today to come up with what we call 6 values, the fish plus 5, because obviously the fairness, integrity, security, and honesty of the lottery is really the foundation. Everything is built on that. But then we worked on these 5 additional values: reaching high and respecting constraints, recognizing that as a semi-private government agency, we don't have the ability to work as nimbly as a private sector company, but we also don't have to follow all the rules that a state agency necessarily might follow. Yet we have a lot of policymakers, stakeholders who provide guardrails for what we can and cannot do. So we want to make sure that we're always reaching high, but we have to respect that sometimes there are places we may want to go that we can't. We work together to foster accountability and trust. Obviously, that's very important in any organization. The outside-in approach is, maybe I'll ask Kathy, you want to talk about that?
Well, that's simply put, is anything we do is to start, because it's so easy to think from an internal standpoint, your department, your organization. And we believe that by starting outside, thinking about all our customers, the stakeholders, we have a lot across the state, it will help guide our decision making and making better decisions that's going to sustain the business and keep it relevant.
Ty, can I call on you to talk about the learning environment since Syed's not here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we have identified, for us to continue to sustain ourselves and be relevant is we have to establish solid learning loops. And how do we mine that information from our organization? What do we do with it? How do we actually measure our ability to move forward and be able to celebrate the wins, and also have the crucial conversations internally about where things could have gone better. So we're very committed to that.
And then last but not in any way, shape, or form least is our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And knowing that every voice has a place at the table and that they belong at the table. So this team before you really did the hard work to put these together, and we're rolling them out across the organization in the next couple of months to really help embed this in all the decisions that we make. And then we talk a lot about crawl, walk, and run. So this quote from Dr. King is also going to be apparent today. There are some things that we are going to talk to you about that are very mature and we're running, and a lot of it we're crawling or learning how to crawl. But obviously we do need to keep moving forward, but we want to do it at a pace that we can sustain. So these are the business objectives that we are proposing we focus on for fiscal year 23 and, frankly, beyond that, but for the next year. And these are in ranked order. So the first and most fundamentally important objective is to sustainably fund this base budget that we're presenting to you today, to fund our contingency reserve, which is our working capital, and our emergency reserve, which we learned over the last 2 years is incredibly important. And then to make sure that we have reserves for business investments that we need to be able to run the company. And I'm gonna go over in some detail a few of these, but I'll give you the high level right now and then we'll dive deeper later on. The second most important objective is to sustain the video lottery ecosystem over the long term. 90% of our operating revenue comes from video lottery, 75 to 80% of our transfers to the state comes from video lottery. If that program is not sustainable and healthy over the long term, we're not doing our job. So we really need to make sure that we focus in on keeping that strong and healthy. The third objective then is to continue our ongoing modernization and operational excellence initiatives. 3 or 4 years ago, we invited Gartner in to help design 5 years, is it? Okay, 5 years, time flies. 5 years ago, we brought Gartner in to help us roadmap out or to map out a path forward to modernize all of our back office systems and our infrastructure because we ignored it in favor of the video and the gaming systems. I'm happy to report that I believe that this fiscal year we will close out that roadmap and we will have completed all the projects that were initially identified, at least to a minimally viable product stage. By the end of this fiscal year, we'll baseline that into operations and then continue to build out from that. The fourth objective, and we're going to spend a little bit more time here in a minute on this, is to make progress towards known play or account-based play. And this is not digital games online. This is about how do we facilitate customers having an account and being able to transact with us through that account in whatever channel they're playing, whether at a VLT or a Powerball ticket or a scratch ticket purchase. And I'll talk about the reasons why we think this is important in a moment. And then finally, this fifth objective is really an internal operations objective, to really rethink about how we manage some projects, particularly in the product arena, to be more nimble and make small incremental progress without having a huge, big initiative. But again, that's more of an internal operating thing. It's not really a policy level objective that we're looking for your input on. So I want to spend a little time, and others, please feel free to jump in and certainly correct me when I get stuff wrong. But I wanted to spend a little time to say, okay, so why, Barry, are you thinking about account-based or known play? And here's our current state. Right now, our sports betting platform is the only product where we actually have players who have an account and we have any information about them. Video lottery.
Except
Yes.
that we have a convenience app and we have 400,000 customers that have opted in and give us information that play video or lottery games. But that's a small amount and we have to work to get that.
Yeah, thank you. So video and all of our other lottery products, it's all anonymous play, it's cash-based. And we don't have any way of really tracking player preferences other than through qualitative surveys and the quantitative that we can get just based on play. We don't know a lot about the people in real time. We have a lot of anonymous players who don't take advantage of our convenience app, although many do, as Kathy pointed out. And then outside of the sports betting platform with cash-based play, collecting taxable or reportable winnings is inconvenient. Sometimes the process for claiming your prize can be inconvenient. You have to come to Salem, you have to, wait in line, although we work very hard to keep those lines small and the staff do a tremendous job, but it just takes time. And then you get a check or a debit card and, there are opportunities to make that a better customer experience. And frankly, consumer expectations of brands have changed. I think COVID accelerated all of that. And they really do expect relevant engagements with the brands they trust. And so we need to think about how we get there. There's a lot of potential. This is not a roadmap. This is not a project list. This is not specific business goals, but there are all sorts of ways we could approach known play And part of what is in this budget is some money to help discover and explore what some of these options look like. But, you know, how do we use things like digital free play to encourage players to register with the convenience app or some other form of account? How do we integrate between platforms and different modules so that it's a seamless experience for the customer if they've got an account? How do we tailor rewards and promotions to individual personal preferences? We all have them. This one makes me nervous when we talk about it because, you know, I'm a Amazon addict, and they're very good at showing me things that I might like to purchase. Makes me nervous from a gambling perspective. So obviously there's a lot of guardrails and responsible gaming aspects that have to be built in from the start there. Yes, we are actually fairly late to the game in some regards on this. This could be a way to enable a transition to digital claims and payments, so that you can not have to drive to Salem necessarily, or not have to have a retailer keep a lot of cash in the till to be able to pay any price that comes in the door. If at some point the state wanted to change the policy position and wanted to allow digital gaming, this would have some groundwork laid for that. Again, there is no plan to do that for the public audience listening.
Does the state generally in other contexts, not lottery, say other entities do electronic transfers of money?
Yes, and you know, you can DMV, right? You can register and make your payment that way. Parks, reservations.
So we do that in some context, but just not in lottery.
Not in lottery, yeah. Yeah, fishing licenses, hunting licenses.
Yeah, I thought there are some. I'm just having a hard time remembering what they all are, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then eventually, you know, a centralized player account management system would collect all that and provide it across product lines. And there are some key benefits, right? A relevant customer experience with more account and known play. We have far more robust responsible gaming tools than we do with cash-based anonymous play. We'd be able to utilize some of the techniques that we have with sports betting in retail at a BLT, and then improve customer and retailer security. Mike, you want to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's, you know, the retailer crime has increased dramatically. And, you know, one of the biggest concerns is the amount of cash that the retailers have to have on hand to pay our customers. And so, you know, there's certainly belief that without some type of account-based play, they would not have to have as much cash on hand. Therefore, they don't have as many security concerns.
And as our games continue to have higher jackpots, you know, there's a player risk when you cash out. You have your claim ticket that's worth now a lot of money, and it's a bearer instrument. So there's a lot of customer value there. So let me pause and just see if there's any questions or feedback you all have on this concept.
So the one in the middle about monitoring behaviors, who would that look like?
So it could take many forms, and that's one where we would spend a lot of time thinking about how proactive do we want to be. But let's say that you have an account and you set a weekly or a monthly limit. Okay, right? I'm going to bet $500 this month, and that's it. And when I get to 500, I cut it off. And in the first week, I wagered my 500, so I come in and I up my limit. I want to go to 750, and in the second week, I'm at my 750. I want to up my limit again. Well, maybe we don't let you, right? Maybe we say, hey, you've already upped your limit twice this month. You know, here's some information. Here's some resources. Are you sure you want to do this? Maybe we flat out don't allow it.
To do that, we would need to engage in rulemaking and make sure that the public has noticed that we're going to cut you off at some point here. So I just, yeah.
There would need to be a lot of stakeholder involvement and, you know, best practice from the treatment prevention and the ethics communities we want to listen to and look out. We also have a responsible gaming consultants on contract that we turn to for things like this to help advise.
Is there any reluctance at this point from RG for us moving to this type of system and thinking that it's just gonna be right down the road into online play?
I would imagine that that is a concern among some people. You know, there's always this balancing act when we talk about anything digital, that you have immediate access to your phone, but you also have these greater tools. And I think when we've spoken with the responsible gaming community, they recognize that challenge because they also they do see the benefits of the tools and how are they applied and where is the play going. And again, this is not about digital play. This is about knowing who our customers are and the channels that we have today.
Of the states, this might be a hard question to answer, but of the states that are already gone to this type of platform, are very many of them involved in online play, or is this something that's working entirely separate from even going there, or?
It's a mix.
Okay.
So any state that has an iLottery or any sort of digital play has an account system. You have to have that to do that. Other states who don't have that or who started this from a claims and payments perspective, I think Georgia is probably the lead. Did this from a customer, very much like we are approaching it from a customer experience perspective.
Yeah, there's just so much that we can do by knowing players to make it more convenient, make it easier for them to personalize on the things that they want. And make sure that we are giving them information on their play so that they can manage that. So there's a lot of work that we do probably in the community already to understand those best practices. When we do that with the sports betting today.
It seems like a good approach to, doing what all retailers from, the grocery store to everyone else. You have a loyalty card or people can track it, we're going to increase our advertising budget, by $3 million, right? I think we got this, we've maximized the, the ROI.
And we've done a lot of that with the convenience app.
Yeah.
Just all the online stuff, cut our traditional advertising quite significantly over the last few years.
There must be obviously third-party research that we can rely on too, but my personal experience, I'm also an avid online customer of many things. The more an app gives me information about my buying habits, actually personally, the more I am more responsible about it. Because I get that data and I think, oh, gee, I didn't realize that was what I was doing. Okay, it's time to cut that back a little bit. So, but I also believe, regardless of our personal experiences, there have to be a lot of third-party research out there. It has to be that supports why you give that kind of information to customers. That would be supportive of this move. I certainly am.
Yeah, ultimately, if we were having some sort of system that could cross all channels, right, it would allow a player to have a holistic view of their gambling, whether it's either VLT or through the sports book, or just how many scratch tickets do you buy every Christmas, right? We have some technology challenges for that ultimate vision of a multi-channel approach. We'll talk about some of that this afternoon in terms of keeping technology current to be able to do this work. But it would give a player a chance to see how much they're spending in one place.
And Marguerite, you talk about, we're all used to doing that now, especially with the pandemic, and so customer expectations have now risen. And we get lots of comments on why can't I just have that?
Just think of the advent of online grocery shopping and having it delivered to you during the pandemic. Wow, what I learned about my grocery shopping experience from those apps is amazing.
Okay. So we're going to move on to the budget. Kathy O, We are gonna pull up the PDF here in a minute. So Elisa, can you, or Nick, on the thumb drive, is budget package PDF.
Okay, Barry, did you want me to jump in?
Please, Kathy.
Okay.
Can you make that bigger?
Yeah. So I'm gonna be, I have all the files here with me, but I'm gonna be reading off your screen, so I'm gonna be asking for you guys to advance the screen because I go over it. So, okay. What we've got for you today is the full P&L for fiscal 23. And we've created a bit of an eye chart for you, but we thought it was relevant. The first column is the draft P&L that is the budget for 23. And we wanted to compare it to two things to give you some information. It's one thing to compare this to the budget that was that you originally approved last year. That is the third column over. But as Chair Sathoff often remarks, we don't necessarily spend everything that we budget for. So we've done a projection for fiscal 22 because we're really at the end of the year. And so we can do that with a certain amount of confidence. And so what you're seeing is that the budget of 1.365 million is down from actual, but up from the budget. And as in case you didn't recall, I'll remind that when we do any sort of budget, we are using the revenues from the OEA, Office of Economic Analysis forecast, the state economists. And so the reason for that is because we need to blend into their budgeting cycle. And so they predict revenues for all state agencies. And so we use their forecasts. Now, a couple of things. Even though this looks like from a revenue perspective, it is down from fiscal 22. Fiscal 22, our revenues are very strong. And a couple of the way that OEA does their forecasting is they do it conservatively, especially for the jackpot games, because those are volatile. They budget those assuming a $50 million rolling jackpot throughout the year. And many times we are way above that, and our revenues will reflect that. So this is a very conservative estimate, especially, when it comes to any kind of jackpot game. So what may look like revenues being under what, the current year, in reality, our revenues usually outperform what is in the economic forecast. So moving down a little bit in the P&L, the commissions are commissions paid to retailers based on our current contract. And so I know you can recall hearing me say at various commission meetings, well, our commissions are up because our revenues are doing well, or correspondingly they're down because our revenues, they are all, our contracts are all as a % of revenue. So whatever happens to revenue directly falls into the commission line. It is our biggest expenditure, but basically these commissions represent what it takes to have the retailer network that we have selling our products. It's reflective of our distributed network operation. Game vendor charges is a little bit of a hybrid. It is the cost that we pay to any of our gaming vendors to operate our games. So for example, our traditional games are operated by IGT, and that contract, the rate that we pay them is a % of revenue. For video, it is a fixed lease payment. For scoreboard, it is a variable %. So this line contains basically any of the fixed costs, but whatever revenue we have in there, the game vendor charges that are variable are calculated at the contract rate. The tickets line is the cost that we incur to manufacture our tickets for the Scratch It. Our advertising budget is basically, that's Kathy's area. And this is down from what we used to spend significantly. We used to rely a lot more on TV, which is a more expensive medium. We do a lot in the online space, which is a more effective type of advertising. And the reason that you're seeing it up is because there was a bit of a COVID carryover in the FY22 arena where our revenues were down, so we cut our budget significantly. But what you're seeing for FY23 is more of a normal non-COVID budget. We're bringing things back. There are some programs that we suspended to try to cut costs, and I'll go over that. But it is more of a normalized budget when you compare it to FY22. Game equipment parts and maintenance, what you're seeing there is we're reinstating our purchase of game sets. We did cut those quite a bit, and it also reflects some field trials that we're going to do to give us directional evidence as to what our player preferences are that guide us in our VLT decisions. And we are going to be buying more VLTs, and Barry talked about that. That is a program that we must sustain. So whenever we purchase more VLTs, we do have to purchase the relevant parts to support those VLTs.
Kathy, I'm sorry to interrupt you, and I was going to go back up a couple lines. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I thought that occurred to me when I was looking at this 2 days ago. Is this cut in cell support a COVID related thing, or is it a plan? We're doing, our business model is changing, we're doing less there.
It is a reflection of a COVID event. If you recall what we said, we in FY21 and 22, we were doing bare bones budgets because we had the revenue fluctuations from the shutdown, and then we were trying to build our balance sheet back. So
you back up now again because it is a COVID reflection.
Yes.
Okay, I just wondered if we were changing at some point during that time, if we had changed our business model that modified everything.
I'd say it's more that we were trying to operate on bare bones to recover from COVID.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow.
No problem. All of this is just embedded in my brain, so the flow is just that. Depreciation, we are going about buying more VLTs, and those are capital assets, which we write off over time. Barry, plug your ears. I know that's not your favorite subject. And so going down, looking at the indirect revenue line, what is an interesting thing, I think, that you're seeing there, we basically flatlined indirect revenue in the FY23 budget, because a lot of what flows into that line is the mark-to-market adjustments that we have to make every month for our investments. And so I am not going to try to predict what that's going to be in the future. What you're seeing in FY22 is a reflection of the stock market and the bond markets at this time. And right now there is, the markets, everything is down. And so when we mark our investments, our 25-year annuities to market, we're taking some losses. Those are unrealized losses. I think I've mentioned that at commission meeting. But for the purpose of doing a budget for 23, I'm not going to attempt to go there in terms of anticipating what those gains or losses may be. And I would admire anybody that could do that with any degree of reliability.
Kathy, does it mean that you just use sort of a placeholder for that?
Yes, it's more of a normalized historical average. I think we're in some markets right now. And so I don't have much gain or loss built in there. We do collect revenue from other things such as if we sell an asset, we do charge for photocopies and key replacements and VLT repairs, anything that was done by the retailers. So there is a normal non-market type of thing that runs through there, and that's what you're seeing.
Thanks.
Public information, we have increased that a bit, again, mostly attributable to coming off of a bare bones budget, more normal of what we think is needed to support ongoing business operations. And the same thing with market research. We are spending a bit more there because we do have a number of items on our roadmap that require some research into what we're doing and how we're doing it, and the types of investments that we may need to make. Salaries and benefits is up. So I will tell you what some of the key components of that number are. I did include a $17 million PERS entry in fiscal 23. If you remember last month, I told you we had a huge write down that we took because markets were, we got numbers from SARS on what our entry was going to be, which was a negative number. And I had also accrued, assuming a higher number coming in. So FY22 is abnormally low because of those credits that we took. But I am taking a almost $18 million adjustment into the budget for fiscal 23. And my main reason for doing that, I have no better crystal ball as to what this is going to be for 23 than I have had in the past. But because the markets are, when we got the credits in 22, markets were doing the stock market was at all-time high. And I believe that is some portion of why we had some negative numbers flowing through. That is no longer the case, at least from the vantage point that I have right now. And so I believe our entry will be larger. And I do believe there is a sustaining amount in that PERS adjustment that would be normal for every year. So that's what, and if you average the 21 and 22 PERS entries, it would be about 17 million. So that's what we've put in there. There is a provision for some salary increases, which include payout for those people who are over the maximum. We are picking up some of the legislated increases in benefits for maternity leave, all of the current costs for pension plans, and we are not asking for any headcount increases over and above what our approved headcount is. So there is, we're still under on our headcount, but we're not asking to increase our headcount. We're filling within approved positions. Services and supplies are up. Part of that is because we are going back to a more normal budget. A lot of that is coming from IT to reinstate replacement programs for PCs. So we were only replacing PCs if they broke. We're now going back to a more normal replacement cycle where they're replaced every so often on a regular basis. And that goes all the way down the line to all of the equipment that supports our technology, such as servers, subscriptions, network. So a lot of that is coming from IT. We do have an increase in services and supplies coming from our biennial security review, but obviously biennial, the number swings around every 2 years and we are due for one. There are other things that we are doing, such as more professional development. We had eliminated that completely during COVID, and a lot of our people are falling behind on their technical or professional skills. We have allowed more travel to come back, and we are including in this line some of the things on the roadmap that are identified that are more operational in nature and will be repeated. So yeah, services and supplies are up. We also, in terms of our roadmap, the investment spending that we have is about 20.6, almost 20.7 million. We'll go over the list on that possibly a little bit later, or even within this segment, Barry, if you prefer. It is higher than what we've been able to spend in the past. And I think Barry's going to talk about the one thing that is a variable for this budget is we have not been able, or we have not yet gone through and identified the resources associated with this spending. I think we're hoping to do that in the first part of the fiscal year. So all of that drops you down to a net profit of 824 million. The admin expense ratio is up a bit, but that really is more attributable to the lower revenue than anything else. And so that's the P&L that I have for you. I have some other.
Yeah, can I pause you for a second?
Of course.
Thanks. Nick, can you go back to the presentation deck? I realized that I had a couple of slides that I wanted to cover before we got into the detail, but I got ahead of myself. So thank you. I just want to talk a little bit of the process that got us here and kind of the philosophy behind the budget. So we have been evolving our budgeting process since I came aboard to try to get to a more accurate and transparent budgeting process. And this is no real difference other than when we're really trying to get to a stable point where we can repeatedly develop these budgets this way and really focus in on what's the base budget that we need to run the organization, and then what are the product and services that we want to try to explore and offer and put those into roadmaps. This is new for us this year, this idea of product, service, and operations roadmaps. So every member of the executive team sat down with their teams and the Enterprise Portfolio Management Office to put together a roadmap of all the things that they want to get done, either need to get done to operate for the year or would like to do to meet our relevancy and sustainability goals and the business objectives that you saw before you. What this means is we now have in one application a roadmap for the entire organization. And we can see what everyone is wanting to do across the organization, and then be able to make priority decisions around what we want to sequence and what we want to focus on.
There just has a question of process on that.
Yeah,
Just out of curiosity, I don't know that I have an opinion one way or the other on it, but is it sort of a build-up where an entity, one of your groups says, kind of our wish list, this is what we want to do? Or is it a build-up plus tell us your wish list, but here's your, you get an uplift of this for cost, all right? How did they put those together?
yeah.
From the top down?
It's a little bit of a hybrid. And in the crawl, walk, run category, it's a little uneven across all of the departments because some areas were more accustomed to the idea of a product and service or operations roadmap, and so I've done more work. Others brand new, and so we said, let's get as much as we can get in, and we'll call that good for year one, and we'll build from there. So it was a little bit of base. What is it you need to do to run the business? And then the rest was aspirational. What would we like to do? And then I didn't put an artificial cap on anything until we had all of that together. And then we sat down for a day and a half, 2 day offsite as a team where we walked through everything and made decisions. What is really operational and needs to move into that base budget? What is still aspirational, and what do we want to do, and what can we afford to do?
Thank you.
Kathy's hit on a bunch of these, so I won't belabor them, but other than to say that we are returning back to kind of pre-pandemic spend levels. So a lot of the increases you're seeing there are there. We're also, as we move more systems to the cloud, we're moving from one-time on-premise investments to ongoing licensing. So it's a cost shift on the balance sheet. So our operating costs will continue to go up. There are some capital expenses that Kathy will go over. The biggest pieces of the increase are $35 million for VLT replacements. We'll talk more about that this afternoon. And then $20.6 million for business investments that help support those business objectives. And there's a list in the materials that we'll go through today. As Kathy mentioned, the key unknown here is our capacity to get everything done in those two silos or buckets, the operational and the enterprise portfolios. We may be biting off more than we can chew based on our historical spend rates and some key pinch points we have in human capital, but we don't know that yet. We are assessing resource demand and capacity, and the budget that you approve at the end of the month, we will then go back and say, okay, what can we really get done in what sequence and in what order? It's not that we don't want to do something, but it's gonna have to be sequenced appropriately based on the available staffing resources.
When was this is based on the economic forecast of when?
Kathy, we're using the March forecast?
May.
Economic tsunamis, hurricanes, how do we adjust when that happens? I know it's not their forecast, but interest rate hikes, inflation, just put pause on things, and you haven't had a real kind of recession in a while. I just remember when I first came onto the commission, seeing those charts of sales, and how we adjusted.
Yeah. I think that's
just thinking about that.
One of the policy choices that I'm going to seek your input on when we get through all the budget details is around the contingency and the emergency reserve plan for just that sort of thing.
Bond payments.
Exactly.
Somewhat indirectly related, and this is just, Kathy, I want to make sure I understand. On the PERS liability, which is really not what we have control over, you used an average. Do you ever look at worst case scenario as part of the contingency thinking? But because it sounded to me like you're saying the 17 million is really an average of what you expect, right?
Right.
It works.
Well, I'm gun shy of this number. I don't want to overstate or understate anything, but
Yeah, I wasn't questioning what you put into the budget. I was wondering if just as part of your thinking process, you go beyond that and say, how much worse could that get? You know, that really in context of a number of things here, but is that part of the process you guys look at?
Well, last year I thought I was doing the worst case, and it far exceeded anything I was imagining as worst case. So I don't have a good barometer on this. I wish I did.
Kathy, let me jump in here for a second. The problem we have with the PERS accruals is we get a number from SARS, from the state accounting office, that allocates the total system cost across all participating agencies. So higher ed has its own, SAFE has its own, we're part of the general pool for PERS. The way that cost gets allocated is through an algorithm. It's a black box, right? A big number goes in and a number for an agency comes out, and what happens in that black box, we have no visibility or understanding of. And so there's no way that we can predict, because we don't really understand what influences it, other than hiring in other agencies and the market costs. So it can fluctuate to the point that it makes business planning very difficult, because if you want to spend $35 million on DLTs and you get a $25 million unexpected PERS cost, you know, how do you reconcile those two? So again, it comes back to that investment reserve strategy that we're talking about.
Yeah, I wasn't at all questioning what you're putting in the budget. I was thinking more Marlene's question about when we do contingency planning. I mean, do you do a 2x, right? It could be a 2x here. We throw that out and say, what would we do if that happened? I was more thinking like that.
Yeah, and I guess my point, Marty, was that
Yeah.
I don't even know how we would say we should do 2x, because it has changed so much over the last couple of years. Maybe 5 years from now, we'll have enough historical data to understand what's happening. We don't have that now. Okay, so now we're going to go back. Sorry about that. Nick, can you switch back? Thank you. So let me pause here, and Kathy, before we go on to the rest, are there any questions kind of on the highest level? Or we're ready to move on? Okay, keep going, Kathy. Please.
Okay, Elisa, let's go to the capital schedule. Capital. Okay.
There you go. There you go.
There you go. Just some things that you should understand about what's in this budget. We are in an aging building. And I've got $1.8 million in there. And what that represents is our roof is over. I think the expected life on it was something like 23 years, and we're in year 26 on the roof. And much to my surprise, when I was in Salem last May and I did a tour, we have buckets out in the warehouse where the roof is breaching. And so we've hired a consultant, and we are actually not going to replace the roof, because doing so would cost, at today's materials prices, which if anybody has done anything on their home, you'd realize what's happening. To replace it would be 3 times this number. What the consultant has come up with is a way to put a new overlay roof on the existing roof. And so that is what that $1.8 million figure represents. It is a big number, but it is not a good idea in a warehouse to have water dripping down on electrical stuff. So we really have to do this.
Is overlay something that's been done that others have done and it works and it's structurally sound? I don't know about this, but it feels
I just did it on my work.
Ah,
Yes,
yeah.
this is.
Got experience here.
This is someone who's a very reputable consultant that, and we hired that person because none of us knows what to do with this roof. And so we didn't want to be making decisions without getting good sound advice on the best replacement strategy. We are in, the next item on there is we are working to move our data center and co-locate with DAS in the building next to the lottery headquarters. And that is going to free up space in the old data center that we are going to be able to utilize for other things. And so there's going to have to be some retrofitting and making that space more usable for other purposes.
I should just like, is this the primary data site? This is not a backup site.
Yeah, so Kathy, let me jump in here for a second. Yeah, like a lot of companies, we built our own data center because we thought we could manage it, should manage it. And now we're trying to get out of that business like a whole lot of other companies and let the people who actually know how to run a data center run it. We also have the problem that we have a water-based fire suppression system in our current data center. So that's not so good for electronics. The alternative is an oxygen depletion thing, which is not so good for people. So we need to get the technology out and the people out and be able to use the space a lot better. So it is our primary system. We're not moving everything. Some of our gaming servers will stay, but for the most part, the network operations will be moving next door. I think we'll be one of the first, maybe the second co-location client for the Department of Administrative Services. They've done significant upgrades to their data center to be able to securely host clients like us.
So then, just remind me, where is our backup?
We have backup in Bend,
Thank you.
and then also IGT runs a backup center in Austin.
Okay. We do have some aging components on our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. And so we're going to have to make some investments to keep those up to good working order. Smaller items on here. We just did a remodel in Wilsonville. We need to do some remodeling down in our prize payment center to make it a better customer experience. We are going back to a normal replacement cycle for our vehicles. And so what you're seeing there is the rotational replacements that we normally do. I know Mike Wells is in the room. I'm going to defer to him and let him talk about the security system replacement. Mike, can you go over that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So we are beyond legacy for most of our security system. We're shopping eBay for replacement parts, doing soldering and component fixes in the warehouse, using bicycle chains to lock some doors closed at night. So this is, to my knowledge, it's never been revamped in the history of the building other than some replacement parts. So this is full access control, starting over basically. So access control systems, camera systems. So we're just completing an assessment right now. We should have a report next month or so with some guidance. So this is also kind of a placeholder number. It's hopefully a overestimation of how much it's going to cost, but like Barry said, right, this is going to be kind of security as a service. So it's going to be cloud-based. We're going to have some recurring costs, not try to host this ourselves also. So we'll have some remote capabilities with it. Yeah, this is for all of our facilities across the state. So we're on 4 different systems right now across the state. So trying to get it all to one system and remotely monitor.
And this all can be, I mean, all of these can be done in 1 year.
That's probably optimistic.
I guess how much escalation.
Yeah, I would say for the security, I'm seeing this, it's probably gonna be over 2 fiscal years, but it's gonna bridge, like, we're gonna end up starting halfway through 23, and it's probably gonna flow into 24, so I'm not sure who the vendor is and what the payment schedule for them is gonna require. So that's why we stuck in this budget, but I don't think this will all be spent in this budget cycle.
But you think even though it's a placeholder, that the 4 million is
You're gonna ask.
isn't a 2-year probably, even if, I know it's a placeholder, it seems kind of reasonable to me, but
Yeah, I hope it's high, I don't think it's gonna go over that.
a 2-year spread, not just for this fiscal year.
That's
Okay.
correct.
We put that total amount in because, as Mike was saying, we can't, until we have a contract, we don't know when payments are due. So there'll be some carryover and some tiny differences as we report out on this.
In terms of these big investments for this building, what's the long-term viability for this to remain the headquarters for the lottery? In terms of space and all those other things, just so I can put this in perspective about how much money we're putting into it right now.
So, state law requires that the principal offices of the lottery be in Salem. So we will always have a physical footprint in Salem. We don't know long-term what the hybrid remote work environment's gonna look like. We aren't making any physical changes to the building for at least the first 6 months, so we have employees have a chance to continue to see how they want to operate. One of the things that we have done with this initial assessment is to understand how the security system could be revamped to allow for us to sublease portions of the building. So we have one agency in particular who is in a private leased space right now that is very high market rates, that similarly doesn't need the same footprint that they had before, and would love to be able to lease, 35 drop-in stations in our building. We have free parking, we could offer it at a pretty reasonable market rate if we could make sure that we could isolate that wing of the building securely and allow employee access to other agency employees. So it's a way to continue to recoup the investment we've already put in that building.
Seems like that's part of the security upgrade that would need to be considered as well.
Yes, and part of this whole thing too, the remodeling of the data center will also, as we free up space in the building, allow us to move staff that are currently housed in the warehouse that shouldn't be in a warehouse. They don't need to be in a warehouse. They could and should be doing their work in a more traditional office environment. And we'll be able to move them into what is now more vacant space in the building. Yes. All right. Okay. Kathy, you want to run through the rest of these and then we'll take a break?
Okay, the last item on here, and I think Barry, you're gonna go over this concept in greater detail later on, is $35 million for purchase of VLTs that would come out of some of those field trials that we were looking at. And but the logic behind why 35 million, I think Barry is going to go over later in all of the presentations. So that's what your capital budget looks like for FY23.
And the last thing that I would add before we break is that when we go over the investment expenses, some of those will end up being capitalized as well as we develop them and understand what they are, but at this point they can't show up here yet. So this is what we know. It will likely change. So let's go ahead and take a break now for 15 minutes and come back at 35 after. It's all good. It's all good. Restrooms are out to the right.
I know.
Your back is squeaky.
No, my chair. Tammy calls me squeaky chair. Squeaky chair. 2 years, you gotta buy a chair.
You work remotely. I know you could have a chair.
We have a lot of chairs.
It's the graveyard of chairs.
Yeah.
I have a nice chair in my full office.
I actually cleaned them all. I actually steam cleaned all those chairs.
Nice.
This was fun.
Barry, I haven't talked to you since, since
Oh,
Just have to think about it.
okay, we're good. Ready to start again?
Yeah.
To adjourn?
No, we just took a break, so you're technically still
Okay.
in.
Secondly, yeah.
Nick, can you go back to the PDF document?
Yes.
Kathy O, you with us again?
Yes.
Okay, we're good. Ready to start again? No, we just took a break, so you're technically still in. Nick, can you go back to the PDF document?
All right.
Kathy O, you with us again?
Yes.
There.
Okay. That's crazy. Kathy O.
Okay. Let's go back up to the services and supplies page. Oop, oop, oop. Okay. I just wanted to put this up here briefly because as we talk, this line is up and it represents a number of things, more returning to the normal budget that you would see in non-COVID or non-pandemic times. And it's pretty much universal where you can see the increases going up. Now, I will say the other thing that we are starting to see is the impact of inflation on pretty much every line item that you can see here. Some things like the office expenses, the fleet expenses, facilities costs are all experiencing the same, and I would say professional consulting and technology expenses are all experiencing the same sort of inflationary pressures that we're experiencing as consumers. But overall, you can see that we are going to do a bit more traveling and that we are also going to invest more in our staff coming back to more normal levels. Now, I would say probably a year from now, you would see those start to level off, but we are in catch-up mode as well. So, Barry, just a question for you. Is this what you wanted to cover, or did you want to go into other things before we move off the budget?
Can I ask a question about the
Please.
category other services and supplies? Can you just kind of give me an idea, remind me of what gets dumped in there?
I'm sorry, Chair.
Other services and supplies. Can you give me an idea of what gets put in there that's not up above?
Right. There are some things in there that are mostly that's coming from gaming operations, and they are instituting some one-time catch up for some training and other programs that they're trying to implement, and that's what went into that line. I don't know, Ty, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
As opposed to training up above, staff training and recruiting?
It's internal, so leadership development,
I see.
training programs for
I see.
people tailored to gaming operations functions. Yeah.
And is that also some of your operational excellence? Is that where that shows up, Kathy?
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that, Ty, because you've got a number of initiatives that are new in that area.
Yeah, so we went through an annual planning strategy exercise, and an output of that was some tidying up internally, and then catching in a portfolio all of kind of what I call the OpEx debt, kind of deferred expense accumulation and getting after it. So some of the components that we just talked about, they fall in 3 buckets around operational excellence, people and rewards, tools and equipment, and systems and processes. So it's a variety of things. So jumping off from leadership development, There's also quite a bit of investment in, for example, our HRBP functions and integrating that more in close alignment with our leadership team operations. There's also things like customer service tools for that department, as well as business operations does training for new retailers. So it's a wide range of things, including even some physical refreshes of spaces in order to, for example, for business operation training, to be able to develop better digital trainings. We'll always be in a hybrid approach for that part of the work, just because there's quite a bit of training for new retailers that's more effective hands-on, but it's the investment and kind of catching up on a number of things that have been deferred. And we have a whole list of things that we can share.
Yeah, the professional services, I see that's like triple, but what's causing that?
Kathy, can you speak to the professional services line?
A lot of what Barry was alluding to, where what we used to spend on capital by hosting our own solutions, we're now going to the cloud. And a lot of that is also the return of replacement of a normal replacement cycle for PCs, servers, and a lot of the operational technology stuff that we put on hold for a while. So it's a combination, but I would say a lot of it's IT.
But that's not it's not capital IT,
No, because it's the hosting services and all of that associated with going to the cloud.
But the replacement of the equipment is also not capital.
No, because our capitalization policy is 5,000 and above. A lot of them, we're replacing a lot of things, but at the smaller dollar value.
And Kevin, that also covers like software licensing, right?
Yes.
So a lot of, just day-to-day operational licenses are it's also changing. Yeah. Yeah. Ty, you want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned the customer service. You want to talk a little bit about kind of what Evan's got in mind? I just think it's an interesting matter. It's part of that whole relevancy piece.
A good portion of this expense will happen in this fiscal year. There may be a slight timing issue just with, just like internally in our own operations with our partners, they've had their own disruption operations too. And in some cases can't get after things as fast as originally aligned on. But it is a platform upgrade for our existing customer service software program that we use to manage the call center function. We are adding some new functionality that's pretty exciting to test, such as being able to chat with those incoming calls, especially I think with players. That will be interesting to see how that goes, as well as other things like being able to have voice to text transcription and being able to analyze that data as to what are the most common problems that are coming in. It will help us also get ready for RPM, our retail partner management system implementation, in which we will also have tons more data in the value chain of end-to-end service across multiple channels for our incoming service needs. So being able to have that platform upgrade and have that data be available, it will also help boost our ability to upgrade our processes and evolve them in the overall value chain management of retail services. So the call center team in gaming operations does still primarily resolve problems largely remotely for retailers, but they also do take player calls as well.
And not on services and supplies, but back on the P&L. Kathy asked, can you talk a little bit about the marketing, the advertising and public information budgets?
Yeah.
Because you've made a lot of changes to that program and we've gone down and now we're going back.
Right. Right before the pandemic, we were going down, I think in the 2 years prior, like 5 million per year types of savings by shifting from a lot of the traditional more to to online. And then we took a pause on a lot of our spend. And we also had advertising for scoreboard in there, which with the new contract with DK shifted the funding back into a different kind of model that we don't have to pay for. So all of those things, the ups and downs, we're really trying to get back to a more sustained rate. But you see advertising, and then you saw public information. A lot of our advertising is really trying to focus on where the money goes, and that's the public information one. That one, we're moving up to really put the emphasis on the brand, because our tracking studies over the last 2 years has shown that kind of information is much more favorable with Oregonians. So the program will shift more to that side of it, telling the story of where the money goes. But it's getting us back to the lower run rate that we had before pandemic.
Okay, Kathy, should we move to the business investments?
Yeah.
So Nick, can you go to the final page of the PDF?
That's it. So I guess by way of discussing this page, if you refer back to what Barry indicated earlier, this was as a result of the exercise of identifying the baseline budget and then all of the programs and projects that we feel we need to do to keep the organization relevant and sustainable going forward. Some of these, I can go over each of these, although I'm not a subject matter expert on all of them. But what you can see is it represents across the organization the different projects, whether it's finance and accounting, gaming operations, IT, corporate affairs. These are the things that rose to the level that we felt needed to be included in the budget this year, and they totaled the 20.6 million. Things like the 365 integration, our operational excellence initiatives to get our billing cycle more integrated. The building, that's a small amount, but the building usage analysis goes to one of the questions that was raised earlier and the comments about how can we utilize our building and possibly rent it out. New video gameplay experience and ticket in, ticket out are initiatives that we've mentioned previously that are next up on the VLT player horizon. Gaming operations, the retailer experience, and the data reporting. All of these things are for operational excellence. There are a number of things that we did not pull forward on this because we felt like we had enough on our plate, and they go back to the roadmap, and this is something that is going to be managed throughout the year in terms of bringing these things forward and prioritizing them when we have a little better idea on our resources. Barry, was there anything else you wanted to, you probably want to talk about your research and development line.
Yeah, there's a number of things. Let me pause and just ask the commission kind of what level of detail you want in this. We could go over every line item, or I can talk more generally about some of the key initiatives. Okay, bigger ones.
Are these in an order of prioritization?
No. They're just in whatever order Kathy's staff put them into the spreadsheet. So then I'll try and talk to some of the larger items, and then I'll rely on my colleagues here to fill in the detail. So the D365 is our ERP system. We're moving again from an on-prem to a modern cloud-hosted solution. There are a number of integrations that we need to do with our gaming systems to facilitate a seamless automated transfer of data back and forth. The new video game play experience, we've talked to you about the higher jackpot style games. We talked about wide area progressives across the retailer network. This is the costs to be able to implement that from a systems perspective. It also has a module that would support known play. And we'll be able to, Kathy, you want to speak to that a little bit? You know the.
Well, it would be a baby step into being able for customers to get recognized in that. So that's kind of, when we did intelligent upgrade, there were a couple modules that we really did that for. One was these new play experiences for customers to be able to give them more choice, and the ticket in, ticket out was another part of that module. So it's completing that work on what was intelligent aid. So it was really about choice, more choice for customers, ease of use, convenience.
The AX replacement is just the next phase of the move of our D365 into the cloud. There will be ongoing releases as we do that. The $4.5 million in gaming operations, this is for the retail partner management system that I referenced. So this replaces 4 legacy systems that we have right now that the gaming operations team primarily, as well as security and retail contracts, use to manage the retailer network. They are so old that we don't even think we could repair them if they were to fall apart. This was a project that we initiated back in 2014, paused over time as we did the Gartner roadmap and had to prioritize and sequence other things. I think that the day I walked in the door 6 years ago, I had people knocking on my door talking to me about HDSS as our dispatch system was about to crash and die forever. And when would I replace it? Well, we're getting there. So that's a big cost. All of those retailer performance lines are all costs associated with the retail partner management system. Ty, you want to talk about the timing of that? This is another one that might shift over fiscal years, or is
For
this,
RPM phase 1,
yeah, or is this is just phase 1 costs, right?
this is just phase 1 costs, yeah. And in the out years, the only thing that's included in this fiscal year as well is potentially just the cloud license renewal for the platform in the event that we're still in a development phase for phase 1. Otherwise, that will go into operations.
Do you have an overall idea? I mean, if this is phase 1, do you have an overall idea of where we're going, how long it's going to take, what the strategy is on the total?
We're at a high level, we have an overall idea, and we actually have a separate internal program initiative called RPM Evergreen, where we think about the out year phases. And we also recognize that some project phases may not actually be software focused. They may be around process excellence and optimization. There will always be ongoing maintenance once, of course, we commit to the implementation for phase 1. But because we are aligned with implementing Salesforce, there are just so many other capabilities throughout the years where other systems can integrate in. And so we will help together as a team here construct a roadmap as to what that looks like.
So what are you thinking about investment versus maintenance, or you're not including the sort of ongoing maintenance in your investment trajectory, or?
In the RPM Evergreen view, yes, but nothing is loaded into the budget for the next fiscal year because it won't hit next fiscal year. We had some internal discussions around some kind of long-term program planning and like piloting work, but we think that we have runway and capacity with our internal resources to do some of that. And so we plan on actually this fall starting that thinking at a deeper level. We know at a high level what we need to do for out years, but we're very much focused on phase 1. because of the replacement of the legacy systems that are not supported.
So the costs you see here associated with the retail partner management system is a minimal viable product cost. It's going to get the majority of the groups that are needing this system able to conduct the majority of their business on a day-to-day basis in the new system and realize the advantage of the automation. There are some parts of Ty's team that don't have systems in place today that would be useful to have this kind of data to help optimize some of that performance. Once we get that up and running, then we'll review kind of what the next phases are to be able to come back for the next fiscal year. All of these investments are in new capabilities, which is why we're putting them into what we call the business investment fund bucket, right? When we go live with them, they get baselined at a capability level, and then the operational costs move into the base budget. And what you will see for next fiscal year might be phase 2 of something or phase 3 of something. Again, building new capabilities. If it's just the cost of the next release, the next cloud update, that'll be in the operations budget. It won't be here. The last big cost, anything over $1 million, is the data center co-location, and that's just the cost of the equipment and the move and all of that. That is a one-time cost, and then the rest will move into ongoing.
Don't we know under a contract with DAS and we pay them?
Yeah.
Did I miss what the R&D, what that bucket is for you?
Oh, no, I haven't gotten there yet. Sorry. I was getting down to that total 18.6. We're trying something new this year with the budget. We're calling it research and development, but I'm not sure that's really quite the right phrase yet. And we're still debating that internally. But the idea is there are a number of things in the product space in particular that we would like to explore to reach towards our business objectives, principally around the customer experience and the relevancy goals, and then also the making progress toward no claim. We have cost estimates for what all of those might look like, but we don't know which is the right approach. We don't know what we're going to learn. We'd like to explore a little bit and then make some priority decisions. And so what I am recommending is, rather than approve line item budgets for 6 or 7 or 8 different things that we might think about doing, is approve a total budget and give the project team the flexibility to spend those dollars on the discovery and exploration, any kind of research that needs to get done, and then be able to come up with the best possible plans they have then to what kind of initiatives we want to do to make that progress, and then come back for budget on that.
So on the other lines, I will be able to see, how the spend is going, how the investment is working for us and the return. On the R&D, how will we get reports on what you're doing there, or?
Yes, we will. We will track that spend. It's not like it's just going to disappear and not be reported. We will be able to track it and report out on it. There was something in my mind that it just fled. One of the things that I'm trying to avoid here is an internal kind of expectation, which is if you put a specific initiative in the budget with a dollar amount assigned to it, people assume, like the others, that it's approved and we're going to do it. And when what we're talking about is exploration, I'm trying to avoid that internal conflict of, we're doing what, and how many, and that's the part, it's really allowing for a more nimble approach to how we develop and explore.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that. I was just, at the end, the $2 million is spent, and
what do we get for it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking for, let us know along the way how that's going.
Yeah, I would imagine probably on a quarterly basis, we report out on the activities in that category.
Maybe there were none that quarter, but.
Yeah.
Barry, I would anticipate that what would provide is something along the lines of, once a quarter, our capital spend report.
Right.
So the other thing I think is important to note about spending is that we had previously identified the reserve that sits at about 52 million. this spend would come out of that reserve. So it's not going directly against the P&L, it's going against the reserve.
And when we talked about the road mapping work, Marty, when you asked about what's that aspirational, that number was like 35 million at the start of the day. So we carved it down.
You've been fiscally responsible.
Other questions?
We're still gonna talk about the terminal replacement.
Yes, we're talking about that this afternoon. All right, thanks, Kathy. Nick, if you can go back to the PowerPoint. So we're to the point now where we're going to spend a little time talking about some policy choices and recommendations related to the budget you've just seen, and to the base budget, our contingency, and the business investment fund. So to recap, kind of where the lay of the land is today, our contingency fund is capped at 100 million. As of today, that is fully funded. We spent it down to, I think, 65 million during COVID. We have rebuilt that up to the 100 million cap. And because of underspend and record revenues, we're having $30 million a week sales weeks. We are forecasting administrative savings at the end of the fiscal year upwards of about $60 million. That is available for you to either transfer back to the state or to invest in the business. The modernization fund, 1520 is the budget department number. You don't care about that, but we care about that internally. That's the fund that we created to support the Gartner roadmap that I was reporting that we will be finishing up this year. At the end of the fiscal year, start of next, that fund, that reserve on our balance sheet is projected to be about 52 million. Of that, we recommend spending 20.6 on those business investments we just walked through. And we're kind of renaming that reserve the Business Investment Fund. So you'll start hearing that on an ongoing basis. And that is the reserves that we have in place to have the cash available to do these work. Because for the larger contracts that are required, Kathy has to set that money aside, so we have to make sure we have the cash available to do it regardless of when the billing cycle comes along. It is hard for us to plan longer term, 3 to 5 years out. We are not masters of our own destiny. We don't know what the landscape and the market looks like. We don't know what policy changes might be coming our way. So it's very difficult to be able to forecast out what that long-term need is going to be for that business investment fund. But we can average a spend over the next couple of years. And we've talked earlier that the PERS, accrual, and other market-based adjustments can really fluctuate wildly with the market. Stock market does, what the state government service charges are, and PERS accruals, we have no control over that. And so that makes planning difficult. If we learned many of the things that we learned during the COVID shutdowns, we learned a lot, was the importance of the contingency reserve as an emergency reserve. We had to make some very difficult cost-cutting decisions at the start because we didn't know how long the shutdowns were going to last, and we didn't know how far down we would deplete that contingency reserve. I don't want to go back to that if we have another emergency, whether it's an earthquake or the next COVID, whatever. I'd like to be able to manage a little bit better in our reserves. So I have a number of recommendations that are reflected in this budget. The first is that we move critical expenses like VLT replacements into the base budget. So it is not, we do not create a false choice. What we've been living with is this sort of, well, we'll replace VLTs if we have enough in the contingency. And that is not the way you run a business that relies so heavily on that product line. So take that away, anything like that, or I mean, you have to do it to run the business. Comes out of the base budget. I recommend that we increase the contingency to at least 125, maybe 150, maybe more. But we can afford to start the fiscal year capitalizing it at 125 million. If you want to raise the cap higher than that, we can without having to fund it. But
How long has it been 100?
about 8 years, I think.
So I remember, I think we have to, like maybe the first year was there.
What was it before?
It's like 80, I think.
Yeah, it's my recall. And then just on that, do we have any way of looking out there in the market and seeing whether, a lot of businesses kind of know what it would look like for them to increase? How do we determine 125, 150? I hate to say best practices, but what do we know? I mean, sometimes you look at, well, what would it cost us to run the business for 3 months without any effort, so what metric are we using and where did we get to for these numbers?
So it's a little bit of a, just throw a number on a page to start a discussion. What the analysis we've done in the past is, what is our 60-day working capital cost? That was at $60 million. If you approve this budget, we'll recalculate that 60-day working capital and use that as a benchmark to see where we are on the contingency. We'll do that based on your feedback today. We can make that calculation, and then it's a 2x, 3x question.
Right. Well, I do remember the discussion we had on the 60-day, whether we thought the 60 was enough. I remember we talked about it. I don't remember where we got to on that.
Just, from, even from a rating agency standpoint, right?
Yeah.
What are they holding this accountable to, like days cash on hand and things like that? What do we need to, there's a lot of ways to look at it, right? From a capital replacement perspective, looking at it from an operations perspective. And we're unique, right, in terms of how we're run and triangulating between that. I think increasing it, I think we should just provide that sense of security. We're only 8 years, right? I mean, how much more revenues we generate takes to run a business.
Do you think the 60 days still sounds like reasonable? Should it be 60 days plus other variables they look at? I'm not from anybody.
No, 60 days were tied to 150 or 125 or
Well, I think what I hear is that they would need to do the 60-day calculation to see where it ties to. Or maybe you're saying it's the 60 days isn't 125, but you're adding because there are other variables.
So historically, with the $100 million cap, 60-day working capital was $60 million.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so while the operational expense is increasing, it's not doubling.
Yeah, okay.
So I would assume that a 60-day working capital is probably around $75 million. So there is an increase on top of that. If you were to go to 150 million, probably 2x of the.
Right. That's what I was trying to get at. What are we looking at to go over the 60 days? And I assume a lot of this is going to be informed by our experience in the last couple of years. So that's part of the increase.
Yeah, so if you think about it, we had 0 video lottery revenue coming in for 3 months at a time. And with all of the cost cutting measures that we went through, we ended up spending about $35 million out of the contingency fund to stay stabilized for those 3 months. If that had been a 6-month shutdown, we would have been in a world of hurt.
So that's part of where, I'm sorry.
Okay, I thought maybe you were not just paying attention. Okay. So part of my thinking around 125 or 150 is adding some extra cushion on top of that as a precaution. The rating agencies, we just got rated and steady, and they're comfortable with our reserves. That's not an issue at this point.
But I don't know if some of those reserves include the state's balance sheet, right? not just what's carved out for considered lotteries or.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
I would assume that, I've read the rating reports over time, but I'm assuming when they're rating us as part of the state. So they get to take into consideration the state's balance sheet, which is quite
It
large.
adds to
They
this.
did,
Right,
yes,
and so,
yes, yes.
you know, I think that the state, when it comes down to it, they'd rather have us fund our own debt obligations, and things like that, versus reaching into the coffers to, you know,
Right.
to do that. And so I'm just thinking, if we were a standalone, right, how would we value it? What type of resource would we need? And all the questions that Marty's asking. Exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah, so from the rating agency perspective, they do consider the state's overall financial
Yeah.
position. We are an enterprise fund, though, just as a reminder, right? We are 100% self-sufficient. We cannot receive appropriations from the state, nor can we borrow. So this is it, right? We're stuck.
That's what we.
This is the cash we have on hand to meet an emergency.
Yeah. And if, you know, looking at the BLT replacements and, you know, just the way things are so tied to non-traditional games that require a lot of technology and infrastructure. Those things, just from a security standpoint and a business continuity standpoint, trade off like that.
Well, I think it needs to go up. I'm struggling with, I don't think any of these figures are out of whack for me, to be honest with you. Okay. I'm still looking at, because it's a standalone, because we can't get money. I'm just, the 60 days doesn't seem adequate to me. I don't know that just saying, well, then let's do 6 months is the way to do it, or to say, you gotta add for these other variables, and then we 2x it, so that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. I feel like 60 days is not enough to me, because that's just not gonna fly. To do our debt service if something bad again happens. In the pandemic, actually we did amazingly well, but I think we have struggled for at least 3 months, if not longer, to kind of right that, and we had to do a lot of drastic operational stuff. So if you're telling me that the somewhere between 125 and 150, if we have the option, I'm sort of one of those more risk averse people, so I'd probably do the 150. But I just need to figure out here what are those variables that we're looking at in addition to the standard one we've always looked at for this 60 days. And maybe you can't be definitive on that, but I know are you not asking for a cap today, you're just asking us for direction today?
Correct.
So we need to go up is my direction, but I don't know how the rest of the group feels.
I think a contingency of more in the line of maybe 3 months is more prudent in today's market and world. The way things are up in the air and happening different every day, so we're making ourselves
I think
more
you,
reason. No, I'm sorry.
sorry, on adding the capital, right?
Yeah,
That's one of
right.
the first things that gets cut
Right.
is capital spending to preserve cash. Knowing that that's our lifeline is these VLT replacements, and we have a constant flow of having to replace those and having a reserve, so we don't have to make that decision. We should go into that calculus.
Were the BOT replacements funded out of reserve before?
Historically, they have been.
So moving them out, how does that impact that number?
It would impact that only as an increase in cost to the overall 60-day working capital, right? If our video lottery revenue stream shut off again, and we had to pay for the contracted VLTs that we paid for, the cash would have to come out of the contingency fund.
Okay, then it needs to be more than 60 days.
Yes. So we're all sort of hedging that statement, but
I mean, if you were to ask me today, I would say 150 million.
Yeah.
Is that sufficient? I don't know. We can't probably afford it to capitalize it
Right.
at 150 million and still do the other things that we want to do. So we will need to build that back up over time. Which leads me to the last 2 points here. that we formalize a mechanism to make sure that the contingency is full and we have funds available for our planned business investments. So let's say the cap is at 150, but we're starting the fiscal year with 125 million capitalized in it. So that's the cash we have in the contingency. As we generate administrative savings over the year, we split it 50-50. Half of it goes into the contingency, the other half goes into the business investment fund. Once we've fully hit that 150 million cap, let's say it's at 150 million, half of the administrative savings would still go into the investment fund, but the other half then is available for you to transfer the state if you want, or to use it for other investment purposes.
Have we, I believe we have the authority to do this, and we shopped this so that we, lately I think it's a good idea. I think this is a good plan that you laid out here. So do we know we're gonna have issues or?
There's a lot that we're gonna have to shop around the VLT system that we've begun to shop.
Yeah.
Again, this is for discussion purposes at this point. It's pretty clear to me that you do have that authority because those administrative savings you would either reserve as you have in the past or transfer. That takes a commission vote. We'll need to work out the details of whether you can do that policy statement or whether it has to be an ongoing vote. That's why we have names.
Well, I tend to agree. To me, as I said before, it looks more like a 150. I like the plan of the split, the 50-50. And I also like the idea of determining later, after we get to your fourth bullet there, what are we transferring to the state?
Does it get locked into the business investment fund so that that grows over time? Can that be reallocated to go back into contingency, or does that roll over? Is there a cap on the business investment fund?
So that's a question. If you look down those policy questions, right? So we've been talking about what cap. That's a good segue. What cap should be set for the contingency? Can we fully afford to fund that cap? Should the investment fund have a cap? And should any of these caps be indexed to something like CPI so that it's growing as the cost of goods and services grows as well? When my team talked about this, they did not think we should cap the investment fund. And I'm happy to let people speak to that if anyone wants to.
I'm for it because I think there are just ongoing investment needs as we become more of a technology-driven organization that we can't even articulate today, but we know that there is going to be future demand because we also know that the level that we're working at right now in terms of what we want to get after in the business investment fund is like creating a steady foundation, but you're not necessarily getting into like the grow or transform spaces quite yet. And that is to be determined. That's how I see it.
And indexing to the CPI would only give you incremental against what's already there. You're suggesting that it wouldn't allow for new ideas, or I'm trying to figure out why
Flexibility.
Possible.
I think that a calculation that takes into account a myriad of factors would have value as well, at least as a reasonable check to see how, if there wasn't a cap, how the fund is growing. But I feel like it's something that probably would take a couple years to monitor and see what the actual movement is to then determine if other policy choices should be made.
Not having done this before, I could see us going this route so that we could gain some knowledge over a few years and then revisiting. But I don't know, my colleagues here to see if they have issues with that.
I know, I mean, it looks like it's funded from administrative savings, right? So it's got a regulator anyways, but it can't really get out of control.
I will tell, excuse me, you asked about shopping around these ideas. We have been pretty clear with the legislature over the last several years that we are not in a, that we are in an internal investment mode, and that has continued. And I think everyone's seeing the importance of the VLT market to revenues when our revenue shut down, state agencies probably impact. Parks, OWEB, they all went through layoffs as well. So
our allies speaking on this for us. That's all it's even if it's not definitive, they should not, legislation should not be surprised. Our partners should not be surprised at this.
Yeah.
Do you want us to answer that question? So we didn't have to vote today.
you don't have to vote. I'm just looking for input. So I'm pretty clear that upping the cap is something you're interested in, and probably a little higher than 125, and we'll do some analysis between now and the 24th to try to get you a better sense of what that actually would look like. Sounds like a cap on the investment fund is not a burning issue for anyone, so we'll let that, see how that goes. What about the indexing of the CPI? Does that make sense to y'all? Or?
Has to be that.
That would be for the contingency.
Yeah.
Do we do that annually? Do we do that every couple of years? I think we could work out those details. Okay. Okay. Kathy O, is there anything more on the budget that you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so, unless there's questions.
One last question. Since I'm relatively new, I look at the admin expenses as percent. So I see it go up from 2.6 to 3.1. I don't have any context for pre-COVID. What was that number like?
It's hovered around 3 to 3.2% over the history that I've had with the organization. There's this sort of apocryphal notion in the organization that we should never get above 4%. That's actually not in policy anywhere. No commission has ever voted for that. It's just sort of like, well, we can't get above 4. We're really not ever much above 3.2, 3.4 at most, and it's sort of almost an artificial reflection of timing of spend versus revenue, right?
Although I will say that, I don't know, 6 years ago anyway, I asked for the same kind of discussion because that seems high compared to what I see in corporate America, which doesn't mean it is high. And we did have a discussion at that time to help the commission kind of understand what goes into this and why, and the 4%, where did that come from? And I don't know that that's important, but we did have that discussion a few years ago, and if you'd like that, we could ask to put that on an agenda, give you some better feeling for that.
Yeah, I was coming at it more from the standpoint of when I looked at the rate of growth from last year.
Yeah.
You know, like indirect was more than 100% growth. It seemed alarming to me, but when putting it in context, that last year was the anomaly and not this year. Right? And so that helps to understand that this percentage is not that far off from the star story.
And if you think about it too, state law requires that we return at least 84% of our revenues to the public in terms of prizes and transfers from programs, which leaves us basically 16% for administrative expenses, but that's often gross revenue.
Okay.
So our administrative cap on $16 billion is pretty high.
Yeah.
So that 3% is out of the $16 billion.
Yeah.
So that it's pretty small.
Yeah.
In that context.
That's probably not 6 years.
Yeah. Anything, I'm going to look to my colleagues now. Is there anything in the budget that you want to highlight? tap dancing because we're ahead of now of our planned
Right.
budget schedule. Okay.
It's good material.
Any questions before we break for lunch? I think we'll go ahead and purposefully break for lunch early because I want you to be able to hear from me before we have the afternoon's discussion, and I don't want to break it up.
He's ready to go.
Okay. So we will be pausing the live stream when we break for lunch. We'll resume it after the executive session. Lunch is on your own. Please remember, commissioners, that if there are more than 2 of you present in the same table, you represent a quorum of the commission and should not be discussing anything lottery related. I recommend that you not congregate more than perhaps a buddy. And there are, on the front table, Rana printed out some
Lunch suggestions.
lunch suggestions that are nearby. And
Yeah.
do you want to reconvene?
I was gonna ask, do
Early?
you want us to come back early? What's the timing? We are a little early. Maybe we should come back.
Let's do that early.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine with me. So tell us what timing. Were you giving us an hour before?
I was giving you an hour and 15 to have time to walk and come back.
12:30 probably would do it for most of us.
Yeah. I'm fine with 12:30 if everybody else is.
Okay.
So we would reconvene at 12:30 and go right into executive session after that?
Yep.
Okay. And I think we can leave ourselves here.
I'm gonna stay here. I brought my lunch, so.
Okay.
All right, Kathy, did you hear that? 12:30?